So, have you ever watched one of those movies that is so dense or so intricate or has so many storylines or plot twists or crazy things happen that by the end of watching it, you are exhausted? And you say to the person sitting next to you something like, "That movie was great. I didn't understand it at all." I recently watched a movie like this where I could tell the whole time I was watching it that this movie was rich in depth and meaning. The action was so fast-paced, things kept happening, characters kept making crazy decisions, and that movie was Toy Story 4. It's true. For those of you who haven't seen it, it's a good old story about our friends Woody and Buzz, and this time they're with their new owner Bonnie on a road trip, along with her new favorite toy, who's a spazzy little spork called Forky. And when Forky jumps out the window because he believes he's garbage, it's up to Woody and Buzz and the gang to save Forky. Now, what happens in Toy Story 4, as with any of these movies, you realize that the movie isn't just about toys, right? And it is definitely not just a kid's movie. And I was watching it this whole time, and I was realizing this movie's about something, but I can't figure out what it is. So I did what any of us would do at the end of the movie. I went to Google and I typed in, "What is Toy Story 4 about?" And you won't believe the stuff I saw. Toy Story 4 is an entertaining meditation on existence. Toy Story 4 is about the beauty in saying goodbye. Toy Story 4 is all about aging and utility, knowing when your best days are behind you and what it means. Toy Story 4 is a message to baby boomers about stepping aside and letting younger voices lead. Toy Story 4 is about loss, about beauty, about love, about connection, all from a little googly-eyed spork named Forky. And so today, what we heard, though, is the disciples are all caught up saying this thing that you or I might say from time to time: "Jesus, I don't understand." Jesus is walking them through a series of teachings, but he teaches them in parables, like Toy Story 4, where the meaning is not always clear off the top. But instead of using toys as his metaphor, Jesus is talking about seeds, about a sower who indiscriminately tosses seed around, and about mustard seeds that grow into huge trees. But when Jesus has finished teaching, the disciples can't exactly go into Google and type in, "What is Jesus' story about?" And if they could, they probably wouldn't like what they found there, because the internet's full of crazy stuff. But what they learn is that with these parables, the meaning is hidden. Jesus even goes as far as to say, people aren't supposed to understand what I'm saying. Only a select few get to know what I'm actually talking about. Which initially sounds like good news for us, right? Like we're some kind of insiders who get secret knowledge that only Jesus knows. But then we realize the disciples don't even understand what Jesus is talking about. And if the disciples don't even understand, what hope do you and I have? You know, faith is weird in that way. This is something I talk about when I teach confirmation, when I talk to parents and students. I say, faith is not like school, right? Growing in faith is not like learning math or science. It's not like the more you study, the more you learn, the more knowledge you fill your head with, the more faith you have in the end. That's why our confirmation program is structured the way it is. We get an hour and a half with students on Wednesday nights. 40 to 45 minutes of it is spent in worship, a half an hour or more is spent in small groups, and only about 15 minutes of it is actual teaching time. Because what we've learned is that key to growing faith is time spent in relationship, time spent sharing highs and lows, praying for one another and worshiping, not sitting there listening to me talk about the Apostles' Creed. But that can be a hard turn to make. For parents, for students, for any one of us who are used to school, who are used to being able to master something, because we really want to believe that faith is one of those things that we can just get better at if we just spend enough time with our Bibles and learn as much as we can. But, and this may be a shock to some of you, faith is not primarily a brain activity. And our own growth in faith is largely out of our control. Look back at this parable that Jesus says about the sower sowing seed. In one parable, the sower throws seed and it lands on all different kinds of soil, on rocky soil, on the path, on thorns, and on good soil. And each soil produces a different outcome of growth. But the thing about soil is, if you're soil, you don't get to choose what kind of soil you are. If you're soil, you just sit there and you receive life as it comes at you. You can't will away birds. You can't will away thorns or rocks. You can sit there waiting to receive a seed. That's the best we can do. Which brings us to the other parable of the sower that Jesus talks about here. In that parable, another sower goes out and throws seed around all day, goes to bed at night, wakes up the next day and is shocked at all the places that seeds have grown, unexpected places. And what does the sower say? I don't understand. And I think maybe that's a phrase that we don't like to hear in church all that much. We certainly don't like to use it because what if saying I don't understand makes us feel like we're bad Christians? But I got news for you today. All of you in this room have forgotten 99% of everything you learned in confirmation. And you turned out just fine. So there must be something more to faith than just our understanding. And I know that in life, when something comes along that challenges us, like an unexpected health issue, a relationship turning sour, losing a job, losing a friend, it is tempting to pretend like we understand exactly what's going on. And we might say things like, well, I guess God is just testing me, or God must be sending me a message about something. But ultimately, we have to realize that sometimes we just don't understand. And that is not a bad thing. In fact, from where Jesus says right here, that is exactly where Jesus wants us to be. Because faith doesn't depend on us knowing everything. Faith is about following Jesus even in those moments when we don't understand. Faith is about hoping that a seed takes root that's beyond any of our control. I remember a few years ago on internship, I was distributing communion, and a family comes up with 3 kids. The oldest is probably about 5. They're all hanging off of their mom, and one by one, they just stick out their hand and wait to receive the bread. And I hesitated. And if you've ever distributed communion, you know what I'm talking about. There's this moment where you don't know exactly if you should give the kid the bread. And you do this little dance, and you ask the parents, is this okay? And you look down at the kid, and you look over a little bit. And the mom said, sure. So I gave them the bread, the body of Christ given for you, and they smiled and popped it in their mouths. Since that moment, I've had even younger kids come up and extend their hand. And the thing is, they don't understand. How could they? I remember asking my seminary professor that same question, what do I do? What should I do in these situations? And I'll never forget what he said. If our ability to take communion was dependent on our understanding of it, then none of us would be qualified. And that made me think, do I really understand everything that's going on at this table? That somehow when I receive the body of Christ, which is fully present in the bread, that my sins are forgiven and I receive grace, and then I become the body of Christ to feed a hungry world, it is a lot to try to understand. So it's a good thing that God's grace doesn't come to us through our understanding. And it's okay if young children receive the bread, even very young children. Because faith isn't coming to the table with any specific understanding of what happens here. Faith is that moment when you reach out your hand like soil waiting for a seed. And we'll still teach one day, but teaching won't make anyone more qualified to receive communion. And that moment is more than anything I can ever teach them. Where does any of this leave us? Jesus says that when seeds fall in good soil, they produce fruit, but I don't understand. Jesus says that the measure you give will be the measure you get, but I don't understand. Jesus says that faith the size of a mustard seed will grow into the largest tree, but I don't understand. I look around a world and I see people who I consider the worst kind of people doing great, and I don't understand. I see people who've had everything in life go against them and they struggle day after day, and I don't understand. I see loss and I see grief and I see illness and I see death, and those are things I may never understand. But God doesn't come to us through our understanding or knowledge. And this is especially important for you students getting ready to take exams this week. To remember that no score you make on any test will make you any more or less worthy of love. And a reminder for all of us that just by sitting here, we don't have an inside track on divine love. We are just soil. Some of us may be a little rockier or thornier than others, but we are soil waiting and hoping to receive a seed. And we have faith not in ourselves, not in our own ability to get it right and understand everything, but we have faith in a sower. Faith in a sower who's going to keep feeding us seeds, who's going to keep feeding us at the table, keep watering us in the waters of baptism, keep giving us what we need to sprout branches of love and peace and grace and generosity and goodness. Because growing, true growth, that is God's work. And the best we can do is to be open to all the seeds that God might throw our way. Thanks be to God.